So, Prince Edward just pulled off something that honestly nobody saw coming, and the way he did it is almost more interesting than what he actually won. Because for years, Charles had apparently been operating under this assumption, and it's a pretty wild assumption when you think about it, that as king, he could basically reorganize the family assets however he wanted. He thought he had the final say over royal property, royal titles, and anything connected to them. And on March 25th, 2026, he found out in writing that he absolutely does not. What makes this whole situation so fascinating is that Edward didn't just win a fight. He exposed a fundamental misunderstanding at the top of the monarchy about what a king can and cannot do. And he did it by being the one person in the family who apparently kept every single receipt. Here's where it starts. Queen Elizabeth II, before she died in September 2022, made a series of decisions that were extremely deliberate. She had watched the family change, she had watched pressure build around money and titles and control, and she knew exactly what she wanted locked in before she was gone. The Duke of Edinburgh title was going to Prince Edward. That was not up for debate. That title had defined Prince Philip for more than 70 years. It was his entire life's role. And Elizabeth made sure it would pass to the one son who stayed steady, stayed out of scandal, and never brought harm to the monarchy. That promise was fulfilled in April 2023, when King Charles III officially handed Edward the title. And if the story stopped there, everything would be fine. But it doesn't stop there, because the title was only half of what Edward inherited. The other half was Bagshot Park. And this is where the whole thing gets complicated in a way that actually matters. Bagshot Park is not just a house. It's a 120-room Tudor Gothic mansion sitting on 51 acres inside Windsor Great Park. It's the seat of the dukedom. And in her final years, Elizabeth signed a letter of intent that tied that estate directly to the Edinburgh title. That letter was witnessed by Prince Philip as he was dying. He knew exactly why it mattered. He knew that without it, Edward could lose everything being tied to that title. So Elizabeth locked it in. The title and the estate were meant to stay together. That was her decision, clearly documented with witnesses. But after she was gone, a completely different mindset took over inside the palace. Charles had believed for years, and this is the belief that caused this entire situation, that modernization gave him the right to review everything, to cut costs, to restructure, and if necessary, to take things back. By 2026, that belief had turned into actual action. There were reviews of royal leases, financial audits, pressure being applied behind closed doors to change how members of the family lived, and Bagshot Park became a target. Now here's where it gets genuinely ugly. Edward received the dukedom in 2023 after waiting his entire life for it. He watched his father carry that title for decades. He finally stepped into that role, and within 3 years, the same institution that gave it to him began trying to strip away the home that gave the title meaning. He wasn't just being challenged, he was being weakened, because without Bagshot Park, the Duke becomes empty. Just a name without a base. Just a title without substance. And what makes this even worse when you actually look at the details is what Edward took on when he got that estate. Bagshot Park was in terrible condition when it was offered to him. In 1996, when the army chaplain left, the building was worn out, outdated, and had been ignored for years. The Crown Estate didn't even want to keep it as a royal residence. There were serious plans to turn it into a hotel or a conference centre. That's how little value it had at the time. Instead, it was handed to Edward under a lease signed in March 1998. The terms were clear: $5,000 a year for 50 years. That low rent came with a heavy burden. He had to fix the place, not slowly, not over time, immediately, and he did it. He put in $136 million of his own private money, money he earned himself before becoming a full-time working royal. The total cost of repairs reached nearly £3 million. The Crown estate covered part of it, but Edward carried a serious financial load. Once the work was done, his rent was increased to $90,000 a year. The National Audit Office confirmed that as market value. And here's the thing that really stands out when you compare it to how other people in the family operated. His brother Andrew never did that. Andrew lived at Royal Lodge for years without ever paying market rate. The National Audit Office documented it. One brother followed the rules and paid his way. The other did not. And now the institution that allowed that double standard was turning its attention to the brother who had done everything right. Edward went even further in securing his position. In 2007, he paid $5 million through his company, Eclipse Nominees Limited, to extend the lease to 150 years. That's long-term planning. His agreement gave him the right to sell the lease and keep the profit. He built security. He built control. So when you look at the situation in 2026, that same property is worth around $30 million. If the Crown estate gets it back, it can be sold or leased for huge profit. So when pressure started building on Edward to give it up, it wasn't just about modernization. The financial motive was sitting right there in plain sight, a $30 million asset. And this is where Prince Philip's role becomes impossible to overlook. He saw this coming. That's why he made sure that letter of intent was witnessed and recorded. Philip had spent over 70 years watching how the monarchy operated behind closed doors. He had watched the institution move quietly and efficiently against people it no longer found useful. He was not going to let that happen to his youngest son. So as he was dying, he put his name on a document designed to make that impossible. By the time March 25, 2026 arrived, Edward was ready. His legal file was built on 3 strong points: the original lease showing his financial investment, the letter signed by Elizabeth, and witnessed by Philip tying Bagshot Park to the dukedom for his lifetime, and 20 years of records proving he maintained the estate at a level that saved the monarchy money. But even with all of that, one fact still made this situation dangerous. Charles controls the system. He controls the structure that can make life inside the monarchy extremely difficult without breaking any rules. So even with the evidence laid out, nothing was guaranteed. The fight had just started. And then it got even more personal because this wasn't just about property. Earlier in 2026, before the lawyers ever walked in with that dossier, a palace official showed up with a clipboard and a quiet instruction. The visit came from the office of Queen Camilla. It was described as a jewellery audit, a routine review, a national heritage check. That's how it was framed. But what it actually meant was simple. Someone had come to count and question jewellery that Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, had worn as her own for 25 years. And at the centre of that audit was one piece, the anthem tiara. This wasn't a random item from a vault. It was made specifically for Sophie's wedding in 1999, commissioned by Queen Elizabeth II herself. It was built using 4 antique elements, shaped in a honeysuckle design, taken from the private collection of Queen Victoria. For nearly 2 decades, it was the only tiara Sophie ever wore. Camilla's argument came through legal language, but the message behind it was sharp. Because the tiara used gemstones from Queen Victoria's era, it could be classified as crown property. That meant it should be held in the central royal vault and only issued out for official use. The meaning was clear. Sophie would no longer own the tiara she wore on her wedding day. She would have to ask permission to wear it. Edward's legal team responded with a document that shut the argument down at its root. It was a deed of gift signed by Elizabeth in 1999. It stated that the anthem tiara was classified as a private wedding present, not a state loan, not a shared asset, not something held in trust. It belonged to Sophie. By the afternoon of March 25, 2026, the situation reached a breaking point. Edward's legal team delivered a direct warning. If the claim on the tiara was not dropped by the end of the day, they would release private letters written by Elizabeth, letters that clearly stated her wish for Sophie to keep full ownership of her personal jewellery. And according to those close to the situation, those letters did not stop there. They included words about Camilla. That threat was explosive because releasing those letters would do more than defend Sophie. It would drag the past back into the open. Elizabeth's long, cold distance toward Camilla. The years it took before she accepted her. The tension that never fully disappeared. By the evening of March 25th, the fight moved out of offices and into a private room inside Buckingham Palace. And when Princess Anne walked in, everything shifted. There was no small talk, no polite opening, no effort to soften what was about to be said. She went straight to the point. She told Charles that if he allowed this to continue, if he allowed private gifts from their mother to be questioned, reclassified or taken back, then the word of a monarch would mean nothing. Then she delivered the line that stopped the room. If our mother's signature on a lease or a deed of gift is not worth the paper it's written on today, then your signature will be worth even less tomorrow. Anne didn't treat the tiara and the house as separate disputes. She made it clear they were the same fight. Both were things Queen Elizabeth II had personally given and backed by signed documents, and both were now being challenged using the same argument. She made the point directly. If they succeed in taking one, they open the door to take the other. And once that door is open, nothing Elizabeth signed is safe anymore. By the time the meeting ended, the situation had changed completely. After reviewing the full dossier, King Charles III's own legal team delivered their conclusion. The position of Prince Edward was virtually unbreakable. Every piece held. No royal order could override it. Charles had lost that fight. For years, he had operated on a belief that seemed obvious to him. As king, as the one who granted the dukedom in April 2023, he believed he still held control over what came with it. His own lawyers told him in writing that he did not. What his mother gave Edward was not temporary. It was a legal inheritance, and it was out of his reach. Late on March 25, 2026, a formal note was sent from the office of the Master of the Jewel House to Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. It was short, direct, no emotion, no explanation. The anthem tiara would remain under her exclusive private control. At the same time, the review of Bagshot Park was shut down quietly. The Crown had stepped back. Everything Prince Edward held was confirmed. The title, the home, the tiara, all of it stood exactly where Queen Elizabeth II had placed it. And that confirmation changed the entire balance inside the family. Because this was no longer a dispute. It was now a record. That note will sit in the archives long after everyone involved is gone. And when it's read in the future, it will be clear what it means. A claim was made. It failed, and the institution was forced to admit it in writing, but the outcome didn't bring peace. It came with a cost that cannot be repaired. The relationship between King Charles III and Prince Edward has changed completely. It's no longer personal. It's controlled, formal, limited to duty. What the public will see going forward is not the truth. They'll see unity. They'll see appearances. They'll see two brothers standing side by side at events. But inside the family, everyone will know what's real. They'll know that one of them had to use the law to protect himself from the other. That doesn't go away. And the structure of the monarchy has shifted because of it. There are now two clear centers of power. At Buckingham Palace, Queen Camilla and Charles continue to push their vision of a controlled, streamlined monarchy. Away from that centre, another group has formed. Princess Anne, Prince Edward and Sophie, supported quietly by Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. They're not operating loudly, but they're holding a line, protecting what was built before, refusing to let it be rewritten. As for Charles, he has his monarchy, he has his structure, he has his authority. But what he doesn't have anymore is the full trust of the brother who stood quietly for decades, paid his own way, and asked for nothing except to keep what was given to him. That loss doesn't show on paper, but it will show over time. And long after the documents are filed and the silence settles, that is the part that will remain.